Final Fantasy VII is one of the landmark video games of video game history. I would argue that it occupies the space in our collective gamer subconscious primarily because of its excellent storytelling. There are many, however, who have never experienced this story, and perhaps never would. That is until the remake came out. Yoshinori Kitase, director of the original Final Fantasy VII and now producer of the remake, has stated that those who have never played the original but always wondered what it was about will be just as excited as players of the original game when that was released. While I think that Final Fantasy VII Remake does a pretty excellent job of updating this old gem from the 90s, I believe there are some story differences between the remake and the original that ultimately do a disservice to the story we all know and love. It also does a disservice to those new to the story and want to experience it for the first time. Specifically, there are two differences that I'd like to talk about with you today. I would also like to point out that I never played the original Final Fantasy VII growing up. I only played the original after playing the remake, so this might explain my point of view. Warning, spoilers for both the original game and the remake up ahead. The first story difference I think the remake ultimately messes up is with the handling of Sephiroth. In the original game, before he's fully introduced, he's more gradually sprinkled into the story before being revealed as the bad guy. You know that he's Cloud's childhood hero, and that he's a legendary soldier. Then, at the end of the Midgar section, you see a trail of blood leading up to the president who has just been stabbed in the back, and then you learn that it was Sephiroth who did this. Cloud starts to freak out, and as a player you start to wonder, why is he freaking out? I thought Sephiroth was a legendary cool dude. Because at this point in the story, a certain image of him may have been built up in the back of your head that perhaps Sephiroth is this game's legendary old hero, and that he's a good guy, all because of how other people have talked about him until now. And so, enough intrigue has been built up to where, once you fully learn about who Sephiroth really is, and his relationship to Cloud during the infamous flashback at Calm, Sephiroth feels like a real threat to the world and a personal enemy to our main characters. By contrast, in the remake, they just plop him in the middle of Chapter 2. This is literally the first time we see him. Nobody even mentions his name at this point. He shows up several more times throughout the story without really too much of an explanation as to who he is. All we know is that Cloud doesn't like him. Now, you could argue that the feelings a new player gets when playing the remake are the same feelings a new player would get when playing the original. I disagree with that argument. The original game slowly and carefully builds up Sephiroth before revealing his monstrous nature. We don't even get to see what he looks like until this moment in the original, which is after the Midgar section. In the remake, there is none of that. He just sort of gets shoved into our face and is presented as the bad guy. There's a distinct difference in the way they handle the introduction of the character, thus I think the emotional reaction would be different. If you're new to the story and don't know who Sephiroth is, then I can imagine lots of confusion and question marks sprouting from the top of your head. Sephiroth is such a badass and cool villain that I think the remake did a huge disservice introducing him this way to a potentially new audience and fanbase.
Destiny comes.
The second story reason that I think kind of sucks is, of course, the ending. Now, in the original Final Fantasy VII, Shinra is presented as the bad guys until a crucial point in the story, when it's revealed that there is a bigger fish in the sea, and his name is Sephiroth. In the remake, it's sort of the same, but not only is there a bigger fish in the sea named Sephiroth, you also have to change the future and the destiny of everyone, or something. You are suddenly thrust into this strange dimension that has no connection to the original world the game has established so far. One moment you're at the end of a Midgar highway, the next you're traveling through this portal because Aerith says you have to. There's a bit of a disconnect between the rest of the game and this moment, making the payoff to the ending not as satisfying as it could be. Of course, if you do have the context of the original game in mind, then you might be pleased by this. The future of the world, as portrayed by these images flashing before your eyes, only makes sense to you if you've played the original. You might be excited at the new possibilities going forward because you already knew the possibilities of back then. If you lack this context, however, then you feel like you've been thrown into a messy situation where the stakes are not entirely clear. What are we losing? What are we gaining? New players, I imagine, would be mostly confused by this ending. And so, the handling of Sephiroth and the ending of the game are two story differences that I think are not entirely friendly to those new to this game's storyline. There is even the potential that more of the original story can change, thanks to the fact that the plot ghosts are dead and Zack is alive in what is seemingly another timeline. This generally also has me worried as the original game's story was already so good, and to think that new players won't be able to experience that story is a bit sad really, for me at least. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it entertaining and or interesting. Post in the comment section below what you think about the story differences, as I genuinely do want to talk about this game. Despite my grievances with the potentially new direction that the remake is taking, it has created a space for interesting discussion. So, I'll see you in the comments below. Have a good one.